the more that we're siloed and the right hand's not speaking to the left hand, the more that different people in different functions understand what each other's doing, we understand the whole of the company, and it's better for the bottom line.
The future of work isn't about shareholder value, technology, metrics, or automation. It's about being human and putting people first through actionable love. Welcome to the Love in Action podcast, where we hold deep conversations with extraordinary people to help you grow as a leader and expand your business. Here's your host, Marcel Schwantes.
Hey, thanks for choosing to spend time with us today, wherever you're listening from across the globe. And if you're in America, it's Thanksgiving today. So happy Thanksgiving. I'm looking forward to spending time with friends and family, eating lots of turkey, and especially watching my San Francisco 49ers hopefully trounce the Seattle Seahawks later this evening. And by the way, that's American football for all of you Euros and Aussies out there. So Thanksgiving is a time to be thankful, and count your blessings because, there's a lot of hate, division, and evil in the world right now. So it's even more important now than ever, I feel, to focus on the good around us, right? So, because if you turn off the news and you stop scrolling social media and you start to look around your communities and your neighborhoods and your schools and your coffee shops and your churches and your workplaces, you're going to begin to see the good things of life, the things that really matter, like relationships, generosity, joy, kindness. We just have to know where to look, right? So I'm grateful that I get to do this. I get to spread this love in action message to the world with these conversations that we do weekly. I feel that the workplace and the business world are places to model the types of behaviors and conduct for the rest of the world to see and emulate. I think it's such a grand opportunity for business and organizational leaders to kind of show the rest of the world how to be more human and kind and respectful towards our fellow human beings, because we're not getting that example when we flip on the TV. So we need to show those examples and kind of be that shining light on a hill for the world to witness. So with that said, I am also grateful for the world-renowned guests that come here and blow us away with their wisdom. And today's guest is no exception. Erica Keswin is going to join us shortly. And I'm grateful for Erica Keswin because if you are a longtime listener that, go back to our beginnings, she was guest number 1 on the show when I featured her back in March of 2019, pre-COVID days. And she talked about her first book, Bring Your Human to Work, which is an international bestseller. And, we didn't have an audience back then. And so Erica was gracious enough to drop in when we could kind of hear crickets in the background. She also was a guest along with a bunch of other rock stars when we celebrated our 100th anniversary. That was a blast. And, and here we are. Erica is back to talk about her new book, The Retention Revolution, 7 Surprising and Very Human Ways to Keep Employees Connected to Your Company. If you're watching on YouTube, there is the cover. So in this book, Erica makes the case for completely rethinking the nature of workers, and the workplace itself. So she walks you through this reframing process and replaces 7 old ideas that don't serve anyone anymore. And then she then introduces the new concepts that are going to replace those old ideas that will drive organizational success. Now, we're going to get into some of those old ideas that don't serve us anymore and then replace them with these new ideas that are going to be really good for 2024 and beyond. So I hope you have your notebook handy. Erica Keswin is a workplace strategist who has worked for the past 20 years with some of the most iconic brands in the world, as a consultant, speaker, author, and professional dot connector. She is the author of the best-selling book, as I mentioned earlier, Bring Your Human to Work, as well as Rituals Roadmap. Erica's work and insights can be seen in various media outlets, including Harvard Business Review, New York Post, Forbes, Fast Company, and the list goes on and on. Erica was named one of Marshall Goldsmith's top 100 coaches in 2020, as well as one of Business Insider's most innovative coaches of 2020. And Erica Keswin now joins us. Welcome back, friend, to the Love in Action podcast.
So good to see you. I had forgotten that I was your very first guest.
Yeah, my goodness. Well, I'll never forget. I was in a completely different studio or house, I should say. I should never say the word studio. This is really my house and my living room with my fireplace in the background. But those are the old and humble days. And right after you came Ken Blanchard. So I'm thinking maybe not so humble. I mean, who gets Ken Blanchard following Erica Keswin as the second guest on a business podcast? So anyway, so then from there we were off to the races, and now we're in 165 countries, Erica, if you can believe that.
Amazing.
I know. So we have a new ritual, speaking of rituals, on the show. And this is how we start. You ready?
Ready.
What's your story?
What's my story? Well, I'll give you sort of the big picture story. So I've always been, I think if you speak to people that have known me my whole life and would say what's one word that describes Erica, it would be a connector. As you said in my profile, I call myself a professional dot connector. The story that kind of launched this for me is, I don't think I've shared this with you before, but I'm going to take you back to 1998. So in 1998, I was engaged to my now husband, and he had a business trip to Bermuda, and I was saving all of my vacation days for our honeymoon. And he said, but I want you to come with me to this conference. And I had my brand new square looking piece of technology called the BlackBerry. And I said, you know what? I don't have any vacation days, but I have this new piece of technology and I could actually go. And I remember going to Bermuda and sitting on the beach and saying to myself out loud, this is the life. This is the coolest thing ever. Fast forward 10 years, 3 kids later, I'm walking around. I still had my BlackBerry because I loved it. I now had an iPhone, and I now was walking around with 2 phones. And I remember, in contrast to that moment in Bermuda with my 3 kids saying to me, get off your phone, get off your phone. I remember saying, oh, I can't believe this is my life. And so the way that that's connected to my story was that as someone who's always been such a connector, I began to see the good, the bad, and the ugly as the technology was impacting my ability to connect. And that sort of led me to begin to look at the impact of technology on connection at work, which really led to all of these ideas about bringing your human to work. Yeah.
Yeah. I love how you connected the dots there to your first book, because it felt like felt like this episode is about that, the way that you introduced your why and how you got to where you were back then. So yeah, that's a great story. Okay. So now let's fast forward to where we are now. Brand new book, Retention Revolution. Why this book? Why now?
So yes, everything that we know about work changed overnight with the pandemic.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, what's so interesting is I wrote about in Bring Your Human to Work in 2018. There was a quote in there about how many people would be working remotely. And all of a sudden the pandemic happens and all the knowledge workers literally go home overnight. And so many of the trends that I talk about in the book and this why now question are for 2 reasons. One is many of the trends that I talk about in the book were not new. I had seen them and was watching them, but they were dramatically accelerated with the pandemic. So a combination of all of those things led me to really re-examine work post March of 2020.
Yeah.
And what the retention revolution is about, sort of the big picture, high level, if there's one overarching theme, is that the world of work has changed. It's not going back. People are living longer and working longer. There's 5 generations of people working in some companies under one roof. And younger people look at their jobs differently. And so they're not going to stay at one company their whole career, maybe not even 2, 3, or 4 companies their whole career. So companies need to understand that and realize that some of the old rules aren't going to work. And if we're really intentional about how we onboard people, which I know we're going to talk about today, and connect them with our values and purpose early and often, if we help them develop up, down, and sideways when they're with us, and when we say goodbye and keep them connected, work will become a virtuous cycle. And that's really the shift in thinking, that the days of the golden handcuffs and saying, I'm going to do this for you and you're going to stay for the next 5 years, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's do some dismantling, shall we? I mean,
Sure.
kind of like a home renovation project. This is demo day. So we'll bring out the sledgehammers. Okay. So you say that there are 7 old ideas about work that we need to dismantle. Before we dive down into the ones that I have chosen for discussion, can you kind of bring them, let's put them on the dashboard first so we know what they are, and then we'll deep dive into a couple of them. So talk about those 7 old ideas.
Do you want to hear about all 7?
On the surface, yeah.
Okay. So the first one, I have the book literally right here. The first chapter of the book is about onboarding.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you want me to share what the old idea and the new beginning is?
Very briefly, just skim the surface and share what the old idea is, because I want to challenge people who are still living by these old standards of the workplace.
Yeah.
Still pre-2020, thinking that this, that this is still the world that we live in, where we want to call them out of that. So
Great.
What would be the 7 old ideas that so many people are still steeped in?
So the old idea is that onboarding is the thing you do before the real work begins. And the new beginning is that onboarding sets the tone for what can hopefully be a very long, possibly winding, and mutually beneficial relationship.
Yeah.
Second old idea is all about everybody's favorite topic, flexibility. And the old idea is that employees are only working when you can see them, which we know got blown up during the pandemic because everybody was at home. The new beginning is autonomy and flexibility are good for people and great for business. And I would add that it's not just the people that you think can have flexibility, that can have it. So we really need to broaden. It's really flex. It's really flex for all. Right. I'm literally opening the book as we go through it, since I don't have that.
That's great.
Okay. Old idea number 3, a human professional is not an oxymoron. Thank goodness. And the new beginning is that professionalism infused with authenticity is the hallmark of today's workplace. And so I know that's one that we are going to get into.
Can't wait.
The next idea is about meetings. Meetings, the old idea is that meetings are just what we do and what we did. And we do a lot of that. The new idea is that if we do them well, they are a critical ingredient in the recipe for retention. We need to do them well. Okay. The next idea is that professional development should be job related. And the new idea, and I even wrote about this in my rituals book, is that we need to take professional development personally. And that is a big piece of the retention revolution. People say, which is your favorite? It's hard to pick a favorite, like my favorite child, but I will say that number 6 is a really important one, which is that managers are in the messy middle of their career and are easily overlooked. In this new world, the new beginning is that managers should be elevated and celebrated. And that is I think should be a huge area of focus in the next couple of years. Yeah. And then finally, last but not least, connected to onboarding is offboarding. The old idea, don't let the door hit you. The new beginning is smart companies know how to get a positive return on employee churn. And that's why the there's a word in the subtitle of the book. It's how to keep employees connected. It's not necessarily tying them to the chair. It's keeping them connected.
Yeah. Okay. So let's dismantle the old idea for onboarding. And I'm going to read the way that you describe it. Old idea is that thing you do before the real work begins. Everybody thinks that's the way it's supposed to work, right? And some people even confuse onboarding with orientation, and they don't really know how to do it well. Okay, so let's explain the new beginning that we should strive toward with onboarding.
Yeah. So a lot of times, I often say, and I actually have a podcast that's called Left to Our Own Devices. So left to our own devices, we're not connecting. And onboarding can't just be, here's your laptop password and hi, here's your manager and go to it. And the data is so strong that if you have intentional onboarding, drastically, and it's really connected to your ability to retain your employees. And so what does that look like? It can look like anything and it can't just be the first day or the first week. There's something called the 90-day rule, that this needs to be a shift in a philosophy and thinking that we want to connect our people and share with them our values and what we're about, even when we're recruiting them on the first day. Make sure that you are really being strategic. That you need to know, like Marcel, if you're the new employee, who do you need to build relationships with? Who do you need to go to get your questions asked? And it could be as easy as I say to you, you know what, you need to meet these 5 people, and I'm going to set this up for you as your manager. Because if you don't, again, left to our own devices, it's not going to happen. And there need to be milestones. One of my favorite examples in the book is from a company called Hulu, which Laszlo Bock started after he left Google. And they have something called the 14-day graduation. Now, their onboarding goes well beyond the 14 days. But what I love about this is that people today want to feel connected to mission and purpose, and they want to feel like they're making an impact. And we all know that when we start a new job, really every job, like sometimes you're not sure the impact that you're having. So at Humu, what they do is on your 14th day of work, your buddy, who's not your manager, just somebody whose job it is to make you get settled in your new role, goes out to all the people with whom you've worked in those first 2 weeks and gets quotes and anecdotes and stories of all the different ways you've made an impact. And then at an all hands with everybody in the company, they share like how well and how much that you're making an impact. So if you had any question in your mind about how you were doing and the impact that you were having, or maybe this wasn't the right place for you, talk about an amazing moment to reconnect you back to why you took this job to begin with.
Yeah. Did you use is that the Gusto company, the Gusto example where they have?
No, that's from Humu. The Gusto one I love also. The Gusto one is it's interesting on a whole other level because the Gusto one is what's called an offer celebration as part of their onboarding. And that's an investment in time before somebody has even accepted a job. So they are willing to say, you know what, this is who we are and these are our values. And you know what, this person might not even take the job. And so what they do is if I've interviewed with them and they're going to give me an offer, we all get on the Zoom. And if you're if you're the recruiter, you'll say, Erica, we're so excited to have you. And then all of a sudden 6 other people pop up on the Zoom screen. And each person says, Eric, I'm so glad, when I interviewed you and you shared the story of XYZ, I'm so glad that you did that because I can see how you can make an impact here. And then someone else says, I'm so excited for you to work on this project with me. And then everybody leaves. And then the recruiter kind of takes over and gives the details of the offer. But again, like a lot of this work is about getting, this is cheesy, but getting the values off the walls and into the halls. How do you bring these values to life? And there is no better time to do it than during onboarding, or in the example of Gusto, in pre-onboarding, because the person hasn't even accepted the job. Yeah. No surprise to you and probably to some listeners, but their yield on who accepts the job is, insanely high. But if you don't accept the job, you know that person's going to go tell 10 of their friends how cool it was. Yeah, I love that they actually bring back the people that interview the candidate, right? The panel, whatever, 6 people exactly during the offer.
to reinforce the values that person spoke about and aligned with the organization. It's kind of like, okay, yeah, here's why we chose you. And now we're reinforcing that this is truly who we are. And you're now part of us. You are here belonging with us. And it's such a great way to connect that person, that the initial offer, pre-onboarding. Who ever thought pre-onboarding?
I know, right?
Sheesh. Okay. The other one that really kind of caught my eye is the Roland plus Broughton. Did I say that right?
Roland Broughton. Yeah, the real estate, the architecture firm in Colorado.
Right, they do generational onboard.
Favorites.
Yeah,
you're picking my favorites. So this was when they told me the story, I was so glad that my book wasn't handed in yet, because I would have been really bummed. So Sarah Broughton went to a conference, and she's one of the principals in the firm, and sat through this generational understanding generational differences presentation. And she came back and she's like, wow, I wish I had known like these differences in these generations. It would really help me understand how to connect better with the younger people, with some of my clients who are, baby boomers. And so she updated all of their onboarding. So everybody that onboards at the company goes through this presentation, understanding generational differences. And what I loved about it, again, it goes back to making things intentional, that sometimes, look, we all make assumptions, we all have misunderstandings, but if we kind of know where different people are coming from and have a bit of an understanding, it does help us, or maybe give people a little bit more grace. And what's funny is this friend of mine pre-read the book before it came out, and she's a Gen Xer like me. And she was like, oh my gosh, I love the part about the generational onboarding. She said, because as a Gen Xer, we tend to pick apart arguments and pull back the layers and poke holes in things. And all of the younger people I was working with just thought I was annoying. But I'm actually doing this because it's part of my DNA. So it was just kind of funny. And if you're listening to that and you're you're on the younger side, maybe you're like, wow, I'm not going to take this as personally as maybe I would have.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so I'm the CHRO or the HR director, and I'm kind of buying into this, because onboarding usually falls under the responsibility of HR, right? So what are my first steps to kind of revolutionize my onboarding process?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there should be almost a whole committee. I think of it as like the welcoming committee, where, I mean, HR, you want to partner with other people, but you don't want it solely to live in HR. In my dream, in my, Barbie fantasy world, I would love for that to be a role that, talk about elevate and celebrate. Like, wow, you have been chosen to be part of this onboarding group, and make it be something that people really aspire to. And maybe and be evaluated on it and part of your performance, process, because wow, or maybe people do a tour of duty and do it for a couple of years, but it basically shows that person who's chosen really knows how to live and articulate the values and help make people feel part of this organization. So you need to have the manager involved for sure. I like to have a buddy or somebody maybe at a similar level who's not in the same group. I love to have a meeting or some kind of conversation with the founder or a piece of part of senior leadership. I also love for the buddy or the manager to make sure that they almost take this new hire on a proverbial tour of ways to connect within the organization. Like, okay, you're a woman coming in. There's a women ERG. We have a group of all managers who get together. Like, what are all the ways? What is the roadmap for connection?
Yeah, I love that, because it breaks down the silos that HR sometimes falls on. And I speak from personal experience. I am an HR guy, so I was doing high-level talent management stuff. I never would have thought of that back then. Now I'm going back 20 years, okay? But I would have never thought back then to bring in cross-functional people to connect them to kind of a common vision of what onboarding or professional development could be, right? By bringing in external voices outside of my own little HR fiefdom, if you will.
Well, and just connecting this to your first question that you asked me, I mean, this is all, first of all, it's not rocket science. Second of all, it's good for people and good for business. The more that we're siloed and the right hand's not speaking to the left hand, the more that different people in different functions understand what each other's doing, we understand the whole of the company, and it's better for the bottom line.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I'm ready to transition to the next one. You ready?
Ready.
So this one is the case for human professionalism, which is your chapter 3. Start with, what's the old idea we need to dismantle? You touched on it a little bit earlier.
Yeah. I think when we think about the old idea, everybody thought that being professional kind of looked and felt the same way. And now being professional, there's a need and AKA demand for leaders to be more human. I mean, really is the simplest way to describe it. And one of the things that I'll couch it in this, which is a different way that it's written in the book, but I think is your listeners will connect with it, especially, just given where your background is and even just the name of this podcast. During the pandemic, many leaders were more human, right? They led with their heart. And some of them, it was in their DNA, their human nature. Others, it was by default because the dogs were barking. The kids were in the background of the Zoom screens. None of us knew how to use Zoom. The technology would go off. I mean, all of these things. And what I saw as I interviewed people during that time was that leaders who were more human and understood that being a human professional was not only not an oxymoron, but was actually a good thing. Their employee engagement, employee satisfaction went up through the roof. And we all remember those days where 60 minutes of a 60-minute meeting were spent literally just checking in. How are you? How are you really? How is your family? Are you okay? And so there was this moment where not just Gen Z, but all people in companies were like, wow, this is what it could be like to have a leader who is more human. Yeah. So a year after the pandemic, I would say maybe 30 minutes of a 60-minute meeting were spent checking in. And now people have, many, not all, have forgotten some of that. And so the idea of being a human professional, again, not rocket science, and parts of the book talks about new ways that people, are dressing and flexibility and having tattoos and, all different things that are going on in the workplace. But at its core, the human professional needs to remember how important it is to check in and say, how are you really, really doing? And out of all the chapters, this is the one, it's like really not rocket science, because people want to know that you care about them. Yeah.
And I think that the definition of professionalism is changing just because our demographics is changing, right? You listed a LinkedIn survey. 60% of working Americans say the definition of what's considered, quote, professional has changed since the start of the pandemic. Just from the start of the pandemic. So it's basically the last 3 or 4 years. And so I attribute that to how the world kind of shifted to remote settings, and then people kind of got more into who they really are and connected in different ways and became more human, more authentic. And the tattoos started to come out more, right? It became like appearance didn't, like you said, appearance was out the door back in those days. You're holding a baby in one hand and the dog is barking, 5 feet from you. So the world changed, and that's just how I see it.
Yeah. And look, if you're working in financial services and you're with clients, I mean, look, it's still, people will say to me, what does it mean to bring your human to work? It's still professional in that it depends on the industry. It depends on your boss. There's always certain times, to maybe cover up a tattoo. But to your point, I think all bets were off during that time. And it is really helpful to kind of know, to connect with people on other levels. And yes, it depends on the industry, but I've read studies that show that certain times, like your clients and customers might feel more connected to you as a business because they have tattoos or they dress differently. They wear their hair differently. and there's a big part in the book around people of color, right, that are thinking about, issues around hair. So yeah, I think that this is all positive change that we are seeing in the workplace.
Yeah, I love that. People of color, especially, to be more inclusive of them. They don't have to change how they should look or act in order to fit with whatever, culture they're walking into. We have to be able to change our cultural makeup to fit with the current demographics, right? To be able to engage and connect with them. So, all right. I'm ready to shift again, but I wanted to make one quick quote on this because I wrote it down specifically for the professionalism. So I quote you on the book. It says, "In the retention revolution, judging by appearances is being replaced by an appreciation of character." So I wanted to highlight that, how important that is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. I want to transition to another old idea to dismantle, but I mean, this may not be on anybody's radar screen because Gallup has been tracking data now for the last 50 years on employee engagement, and a lot of that falls on the manager's responsibility, et cetera. But this is so good. Okay, it's old idea number 6 about the role of the manager and how we should shift our mindset around how to perceive them and how to elevate them. So you talk to us about a little bit about how it's time to elevate and celebrate the manager.
Yeah. So it was interesting in the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of companies, Meta and Google and many of the tech companies started getting rid of their middle managers. And I just remember saying to myself, like, that doesn't seem to be like a great idea. I would say over time, organizations have become flatter. There are fewer rungs in the proverbial ladder, but these middle managers are really at the center. I mean, even just changing that vernacular, they are at the center of everything that is going on. So when a manager says, we're going back to the office, instead of 2 days, we're going to 3 days or 4 days, you go tell everybody. And it's really challenging. The other thing I would say about being a middle manager is that, or, new manager, middle manager, is that oftentimes you are still doing a lot of your individual contributor day job. And so many managers don't even have the time, let alone the energy, let alone the training to be good managers. But I believe in the retention revolution, elevating and celebrating these managers and giving them the skills to be good managers is going to be critical. And the companies that come out on top of this whole thing are the ones that invest in these middle managers. When you think about middle managers, being a manager is often more of it's never but it's often not a destination. It is just like a box check on the way to becoming a senior leader. But there are a lot of people who are great at managing and may not want to take on other jobs. And so, one great example, and they've been doing so much work around this, is L'Oreal, where their new CHRO of the USA, Stephanie Kramer, has been having these people manager town halls all day, learning and development, elevating. They have had amazing speakers. You get to come to this and invest in your own learning and development as a people manager, even if you only have one person reporting to you. It doesn't matter. And they're really creating this community of people managers and making it a thing versus something that you just do on the side.
Yeah. Okay. Just to put this into its proper context, because I kind of missed the old idea. So I'm going to read it from the book.
Right.
The old idea is managers are in the messy middle of their career and your organization and are easily overlooked.
Yep.
Yeah. And I hammer them pretty good in a lot of my ink columns and even in this podcast, right? And put the blame on them. I'm raising my hand there. And so here's the new beginning. Managers should be elevated and celebrated. One of the examples that you gave, I don't know if you want to talk about O.C. Tanner.
Yeah.
They build, so you'll talk to, but I'll set it up like this. They build their entire company culture around supporting their managers. That is that is fascinating to me because I preach and coach and teach on creating an environment for your employees to thrive, not your managers. And so the managers are running around, oh my gosh, they're pulling their hair because they realize, yeah, culture is important and it falls on me. And you're saying create, or O.C. Tanner basically has reinvented that idea to say, no, we build a culture around our managers so they can support their employees. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I mean, I love O.C. Tanner, and I got to interview Mindy Cox, who's interesting, her title. She's the head of HR, head of people, but also the head of marketing, which I also think is just so interesting to really have this lens, external, internal lens. And the story that she shared, just to highlight how important the managers are to their culture, is that she had a manager come to her office and knock on the door and come in for a meeting and say, Mindy, I have all these people coming to me asking me to help them with this and solve this. And I don't even know what to do. You don't have any time. And she said, this is your job now. That it was almost freeing them and reminding them this other stuff that they were doing, they needed to be, they were offloading it and to say, no, this is actually your job. This is what you get paid to do. It may not be 100%, but it's certainly not 10%. This is what you're doing, and we value it. And it was, people just were like, oh, I get it now, versus in many places, okay, one day you're an individual contributor and the next day you get promoted. And because you're a manager, because a lot of times to stay on the individual contributor track, you top out. So now you're a manager, but nothing in your day has really changed other than now 3 people are calling you for stuff.
Yeah. Can I read the paragraph that talks exactly about what you just said?
Yeah, sure.
Right from the book. Okay. So Mindy Cox asked a newly promoted manager how things were going. The manager replied, "Hey, I'm so grateful for this opportunity, but I can't get anything done.
Okay.
These people are in my face all day long, asking me to solve this problem or that problem, and I just can't get to the work anymore." This is the manager talking. So Mindy Cox responded, "All of that stuff is the work now." As in, the people are your work now, as it should be, because expectations change when you're elevated into a leader role.
Yeah.
And then
right. And people just telling you that, yes, this is your job now. I mean, it's and I mean, of course, and O.C. Tanner does this, but when you tell people this is your job now and you give them the time and space to do it, you also need to make sure that they have the skills to do it as well. And so, putting time and energy into training your managers, upskilling your managers. One of the companies in the book, Upwork, has just a community, a time when all managers come together and hear from one of the senior leaders. And also, managers want to be able to connect with other managers. Sometimes they may not share what's going on with the senior leader, but it's really hard to be a manager, especially now. And so to create the scaffolding to give them an opportunity to connect with each other. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. You folks, you got to get that. You got to get this book because it's so rich with these new ideas and in the shift that we should make. And that one really blew me away, Erica, with the managers and thinking about, and this is not to create the kind of manager where they become a dumping ground for employee complaints. And how do I do this? How do I do? No, we don't want that to happen, because like Erica said, we want to empower our employees as well, so that they have the right competencies to not come to the manager with, "Hey, boss, how do I do this or that?" No, you should know that. We gave you ownership. We gave you competence. Go solve problems on your own. That's why we hired you, right?
Yep.
But when it's those times when the employees need those coaching moments, those nudges, and where it's safe for them to come to the manager, to ask questions, that there is psychological safety around that. And then now the manager's role is to empower employees to, nudge them in the right direction and to have those coaching moments or micro coaching moments, as they say, to help elevate the employee as well. So now it's a win-win for the whole organization. But it's so interesting to me that OC Tanner focused on the manager first to create the culture around them to help the employee.
If people are interested more on this topic, I just launched a LinkedIn learning course all about how to redesign the role of the modern manager. And so maybe we'll put it in the show notes, but it's on my, like if you go onto my LinkedIn and click on it, I think it's still for a while, the first time someone clicks on this one link, it's like free for 24 hours so people could check it out. But it really is making the business case to leaders about why we need to elevate and celebrate our managers.
Yeah. All right. This has been so much fun. So I'm going to give you the reins and let you pick out maybe one last old idea we need to dismantle. What would you say that is?
I think going into 24, a big area of focus needs to be focused on taking professional development personally. I think that it used to be that professional development was just job related, and that there was this very much, you kind of move up every year in this little ladder. And that chapter is called From Ladders to Lily Pads, because there aren't as many rungs in the ladder. And if we don't get creative about how to help people develop up, down, and sideways, they will hop. That's why it's called lily pads. They will not only hop, they will hop right out of your organization. And so, it could be helping. It's really asking people how they want to develop. And it's why it's very critical to the whole idea of the retention revolution, because if I ask you how you want to develop and there's not anything in my department, in the retention revolution, the managers really understand why it's important, like this, if you love them, let them leave, to say, you know what, I'm going to help you get a role in a different part of the organization. Yeah. And that's part of training managers to not hoard talent, but it needs to be a big area of focus. Gen Z, a recent Gallup study found that Gen Z, even more than compensation, they want to grow and develop on the jobs. So if we are not collectively thinking creatively about how to help people grow, they will leave your organization. So I think it's a really important one for this next year.
Love it. Okay. As we wind down here, I pose you the leadership love question, not a ritual when you were guest number one, Erica. So here it is. How do we lead our businesses and organizations, our employees, with more practical and actionable love day in and day out? What would you say that is?
What I try to do and what I feel like is my superpower is to give them a roadmap. I think that many leaders today, what's causing so much of the stress and overwhelm, whether they're the top, new managers, middle man, really everybody, is that because there's no roadmap, everyone is feeling just reactive. It's like putting out fires left and right. And so to me, it's to take a step back and really try to approach this. And this is what I try to do in all three of the books, is to give people a roadmap to create a more human workplace that's good for people and great for business.
That's awesome. Okay, we bring it down or bring it home with two questions, as we do with every guest. Personally, what's really tugging at your heart right now that you'd like us to know?
So, we're in the middle of a war in the Middle East, and I feel like my life changed overnight on October 7th for a variety of reasons. One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is I brought a group of leaders together like 2 days ago with Matthew Gewirtz, who had just written a book called To Build a Brave Space. And the conversation was around, with this group of leaders from all different companies, given what's going on in the world, how do we build a brave space to have challenging conversations? And what he said, which is the one line that really stuck with me, he said, a lot of people in the worlds where you and I both work, people talk about we want a safe space. He said a safe space should be the floor. A brave space is to lead through the lens of humanity and empathy and connection to then enable us to have these difficult conversations.
Powerful, powerful. Finally, you close us out, Erica. What's that one thing you'd like listeners to walk away with today?
I would say this idea of being intentional. None of this stuff's rocket science, but left to our own devices, right? Excusing the cheesy pun. We are not connecting. We are not putting together a roadmap. We are just reacting. And so, again, left to our own devices, we're not connecting. Take some time and make sure that you're connecting, especially as we're in Thanksgiving season, that you're connecting with others in your personal life, your work life, but also taking time to connect with yourself.
Speaking of connecting, where can people go to connect with you if they want to learn more about you and find out about your work, your books, etc.?
Good segue. You can find me on my website, ericakeswin.com, which has links to the books, to my LinkedIn learning courses, to the topics of my keynotes and workshops that I do. And you can, reach out to me directly. For anybody that says they heard this conversation on this podcast, I'd love to send you this electronic copy of Bring Your Human to Work, where it all began. So just email me at erica@ericakeswin.com and tell me that you heard us here.
Fantastic. Hey, it's always a blast hanging out with you. And every time you bring out a book, you're going to come back here and share it with the world. So you're a regular guest now. No matter how you slice it, being guest number one, you're kind of stuck with us. So.
I'm always going to be guest number one. I love it. I don't know if I'm writing another book in the foreseeable future, but you'll be the first to know when I do. Fantastic.
All right. It's been a blast. Thanks again for blessing us with your presence.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And happy Thanksgiving.
Too.
All right. Keep the conversation going on social media with hashtag Love in Action Podcast. And also look to my show notes, as well as a YouTube link to this very episode to watch. And you can find all that on my website, marcelschwantes.com. And finally, if you're interested in sponsoring an episode of the show, let's chat. You can reach me on my website or find me on LinkedIn. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Love in Action podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it, subscribe, and leave us a review. Until next time, don't forget, the future of leadership is love in action. Believe it, practice it, and watch your business grow.